Hey, everyone here at the Investing Stuff You Should Know podcast. We have a really cool guest with us today. Something that probably the show has been a little bit light on, and that is the commercial broker relationships and the people that we've talked to. So we got a really cool guest on. He's done a lot of stuff. Dan, can't pronounce his last name because I'll butcher it. But Dan, thanks for showing up and being on the show and giving us the knowledge that you have over 50 years of experience.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Why
Looking
don't you
forward to it very much.
save me here and pronounce your last name for us so I don't look like too much of an idiot.
Yeah, sure. So it's Dan Lewkowicz.
Lewkowicz. Okay, there we go. Dan, so it's awesome. So Dan's got 50 years of experience in the commercial space. He is kind of around Motor City, Detroit, Michigan area. He specializes really in a very kind of a selective area of the commercial space. But so we're going to talk about that, the specialization. We're going to talk about being a commercial broker. And we're going to talk about just the things he's learned. He's got an awesome family. He's got 5 kids, a beautiful wife. And I come from a large family, 9 kids. I was one of 9. So Dan is also trying to grow his own crop of kids there in Michigan. So Dan, thanks for joining us today, man.
Hey, my pleasure. Definitely looking forward.
Okay, man. So let's start out with a little bit of family and why what's the compelling thing for a big family? I know it's not commercial broker speak, but we're gonna start with who the person of Dan is.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. You caught me off guard a little bit, but that's
Oh
fun
yeah.
too. So I did not come from a large family. I have one brother who I'm very close with. But currently, as you mentioned, I have 5 kids. I have four kids from my first marriage and 1 from my second. So I think the impetus there is just that there's a lot of opportunity in the world, a lot of great things to experience, and I want to make sure that my kids experience that, and family is definitely very important to me.
I think we should celebrate. I think we should celebrate large families, Dan. I don't think they get enough. It's like, when you see as a new dad myself, the amount of time it takes to raise one child and coming from a big family, just like the amount of effort and take, and it's the future generation. It really is the core, and we'll touch on this in a minute. The core of our economic growth is population growth. We're literally creating our future demand and population and vitality of our economy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I read some interesting stuff a few years ago that, any civilization whose birth rate dropped significantly below 2 did not survive another, couple hundred years. So, without replacing the population or growing the population, we create all kinds of problems. I think that it's really cool for me. My oldest is going to be 14 in a couple of weeks, and all my kids, thankfully, are very, very intelligent. And my oldest daughter is exceptionally intelligent, and just to hear her and speak with her and watch those gears turn is just, to me, it's awesome. I mean, there's really nothing better than to see that, or to get that text message with a collage that she put together of all the kids doing fun things, inside and outside. So I think that it's definitely crucial for the continuation of any society. I think that most people believe that the way that they're living their life is the proper way to live their life. So if that's the case, then bringing more children into the world to follow in those footsteps is definitely a good thing.
Awesome, man. Okay, I know that was a little bit of a sidebar, but no. So back onto commercial real estate, and that's what people want to hear. But also these personal stories make it relevant as well, and that's it gives insight into who you are and the audience or the guests that we bring on. So talk to us about what drew you into focusing in being a commercial broker. I know you've had some other some residential stuff as well, but we'll kind of focus today just in the commercial broker side. What makes a good commercial broker, and what drew you into the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I have a background in single family home purchase, renovation, and resale. And, that's something that I was doing on the side for a number of years. And when I finally, left corporate America, at the time I was working for Amazon as a business development executive, I went full time into house flipping. And, we could sit here for hours and talk about, interesting, funny, or, unbelievable stories, as it pertains to things that I've seen during my years of doing the house flipping. So, around the same time, I got introduced to this concept of commercial brokerage. And quite frankly, I mean, I had been grinding away at flipping houses. And I'm sure for anyone who's listening in your audience, they can definitely relate to the fact that, in anything in the investment space, especially with house flipping, you definitely win some, you definitely lose some. And, there's nothing that's, quite as draining as finishing up a flip when you're not going to make money, right?
Oh yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that unfortunately is just part of of reality as a house flipper. And I like to just tell things the way that they are, because I think people should know. Yeah, I've had some great experiences being very successful in flipping houses, and I've had different projects that didn't go as I had planned. So at the time, I had kind of started toying around with this idea of commercial brokerage. I didn't really understand the net lease space. It didn't make sense to me that people were buying properties at 4, 5, 6% returns when I was used to the Detroit, Michigan, 30% returns on rental properties at the time. But as I got more involved in that space, what I quickly realized as a broker was that there are numerous advantages. I mean, the way that I run my business, especially today, I do invest quite a bit of capital in my business, in marketing, in support services, administrative services. But in general, you can run your own brokerage business, your own business as a commercial agent in a pretty lean fashion.
Okay.
So if you look at the average commercial real estate deal, let's say in our space, it's roughly $4 million, and you look at like an average fee would be, let's say, around 4%. Maybe less, maybe more, depending on the asset, depending on the relationship of the client. So, 4% of 4 million is what, $160,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even, let's say, worst case scenario, there's another agent who's bringing the buyer. And in my experience, I typically do what's called double ending. I typically represent the buyer and the seller, but let's just say it's an example where there is a buyer's representative who's representing the buyer. So you split that fee, 80,000 to one agent, 80,000 to the other. Depending on your split with your brokerage, you're going to have to give up some of that. But at the end of the day, an average deal where you don't double end the transaction, you could be making $60,000 or $80,000, which is probably a really good flip. You have
it is, man.
No money out of pocket.
I've done flips too, and it's like, yeah, that's true. Like across the country. I mean, not everywhere, but like that's not a bad number for a national average.
Exactly. So, and in this case, you've got relatively no money out of pocket, almost no risk. Most of my job is done, remotely, or I would say like off site. We sell properties all over the country. So, I just find that, and that's one deal, right? Maybe somebody could do 5, 10, 15 of those deals a year. The money starts adding up. So from my perspective, it made a lot more sense to focus on brokerage. And at that point, I decided to laser focus and focus exclusively on brokerage because I enjoyed it so much and because I found it to be so lucrative.
Awesome, man. And thank you for sharing that contrast. And I think that's really important. We bring all kinds of professionals on the space or into the podcast, and then they have their own path. Maybe they've stayed full time. Maybe they've been in tech or engineering or something, and then they've stepped into real estate. There's all kinds of different journeys, but thank you for breaking that out. That's the first time that someone has articulated it so well, of like going from house flipping to actually to like you said, a brokerage focus, and then you started your own firm in that as well here. So then another part of that question, Dan, was what are the attributes of a successful commercial real estate broker? Obviously yourself, and then I'm sure you've seen other professionals that are really dominating or doing well in their space. What are some skills and some things that they bring to the table that seem to lead to success?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, I would say is that, someone is going to have to make sure that they're trying to add value. It's very easy in commercial real estate to get in a rut where you see an opportunity to put a deal together, or pressure a deal together, or to pressure a deal to stay together. But for the long term, that's not really the best way to conduct your business. The best way to conduct your business is to have a value add mentality all the way. So when you're dealing with a client, you want to look for a property that's going to be a good fit for them long term. If there's another property that maybe is going to have a better fee for you, but is less of a fit for them, it's not a good idea to go with that property, because we're in a relationships business. So I think the people that last in this business are those that build relationships and that conduct themselves on a day-to-day, a moment-to-moment, with that mentality of, is what I'm doing in the best interest of the client? Is this the advice that I would give to myself? Is this the advice I would want to receive? So I think that's definitely very important, and we can't overstate that. I think that is crucial. Number two is hustle, grit and gumption. This is a business where you have to grind, especially when there's things are changing in the market. You have to sometimes double down and just close your office door and really put 100% of what you've got into whatever you're doing, whether it's creating your database, whether it's making your cold calls, whether it's trying to find someone who's looking to sell, whether it's looking for a buyer, whether it's social media, if that's something that's part of your practice. It's obviously a part of mine. So that's definitely, I would say, number two. Number three is you need to make sure, this is kind of like 2 points in one, but you need to make sure that you have great people that you're surrounded by, that the people that you work with are people that have integrity and that have knowledge and wisdom, and that they're willing to share that with you. And you have to make sure to invest in your education, because it's so important as a broker to not only understand exactly what's going on in the market at any given moment, right? Because people ask that every single day. People want to know what my opinion is of where the market is and where the market's headed. But you also have to understand the asset classes that you work in. I'm constantly sharpening my skills, constantly going to workshops and seminars, trying to make myself a better broker, because I believe that it's very important to show up in the world so that at the greatest level of excellence as possible. So that's something that's definitely very important to me. So I think that those are all very crucial aspects to being a successful broker. And people should just know that it's not an easy job, right? It's relatively simple in terms of the fundamentals. But it's not easy. If you're someone who's stuck around and has been successful in the game for a number of years, there's a reason. And that's why it's so important for people listening to reach out to good brokers, whether it's myself or someone else, to make sure that you have that advice and that guidance. I can't tell you how many times I've had to pick up the pieces from individuals that were given bad advice by other brokers, and now they were stuck in a situation and they needed help. So first things first, if you're on the other side of this, right, if you're the person that's looking for the broker, make sure that you have a broker that is a hustler, a broker that's investing in his or her education, a broker that is surrounding themselves by good people at a good firm, and that's working very hard to be on top of their game, in terms of their skill set and their knowledge at all times.
That is a fantastic breakdown of why you should go with a good broker. And also there's so many different things we could take that, what you just said, but just to kind of summarize real quickly for, maybe as a buyer or as an investor, Dan, that is like good brokers are doing, like, maybe you may not understand it. And you may also have the perception, which you just kind of alluded to, that it's the basics are basic. However, to do the basics well is you're doing something all day and doing it well, even though it's basic, but you're doing all those things well. It takes a lot of work and a lot of focus and a lot of time to build up that strong foundation. So, just more about just kind of a boost to what you were just saying there. That is like, sometimes you have the attitude that, oh, I don't want to, pay the broker, or I can do this myself. But the amount of knowledge and the kind of things that you study and learn, and the kind of inside track you have is so vital. So even if it is, it's not like I said, it's 4% of a typical deal, that could save you, 10, 20, 30, 40% on doing it wrongly, doing it badly, or something that you miss by someone that's invested so heavily in their craft.
Can I give you a good example about that?
Please. I love examples.
I mean, listen, some people, I would say people who are a little bit misguided, get concerned about the brokerage fees, right? Because, they do add up. And, we work with clients every day on brokerage fees, but, we're talking a couple percent, right? Last year, I sold a deal, and he was a client of mine. I sold some previous properties for him. And when he came to me, he had some property, and he thought it was worth $32 million. Okay. So if somebody would have come along to this individual and said, hey, I know you own, such and such a property, I'll give you 32 million, he would have done a sale. We ended up evaluating the property, listing the property for sale. We sold it for $47.5 million. Okay. So if that's not a testimony to the value of a broker, I don't know what is.
Yeah, man. And then of course that's obviously super exciting, that delta between 32 and 47 million, 15 million dollars, but also people go the other way. They think like, oh, like I got this, piece of crap multifamily 12 unit, I think it's worth 50 million, whatever, $10 million. And like, sorry, man, like this is probably worth like 2.5, it's like, it's going to sit there forever and, frustration and maybe your life is on hold while you're thinking this thing's going to sell. So a lot
Yeah.
of advantages, but yeah, so I love that. That example is amazing. I love that
And,
amazing example.
especially today, we've had so much volatility and change over the last 3, plus years in all different sectors of commercial real estate. If you own commercial property, you need to reach out to me because, or whoever the broker is, because there's no excuse for not having an evaluation today. We
Yeah.
do evaluations all the time, and we do it for people who want to list their property, and we do it for people that don't want to list their property. But if you own commercial real estate, there's absolutely no reason that you shouldn't know exactly what it's worth today. And you know what? Get that evaluation today, come back in 3 months and get it again. So you can see that delta, you can see that change. But that's what we're here for. We're here to add value, and we're here to provide, knowledge, to provide, real-time market knowledge about the value of an asset as it sits today.
Awesome, man. Let's talk about your specialty for a little bit here, Dan. So from the bio you sent, you specialize in shopping centers, medical office buildings, pharmacies, quick service restaurants, and automotive repair and parts stores. So those things all conjure up a certain look and maybe even a certain sector in our minds of what that is. What is unique about those asset classes or those particular buildings and what they're offering for services to the populace?
Yeah, great question. So we can start with quick service restaurant. That's one of my favorites. So quick service restaurant typically trades on the lower end of the cap rate spectrum, depending on where the asset is, how much term is left on the lease.
Why is that? Is just because is the margin just thin in the operating model or why?
So the margins are actually, believe it or not, they're not that thin.
Oh,
Typically, I just read an article this morning. The average quick service restaurant, in terms of their occupancy costs, so occupancy costs would be the cost of their rent, as it relates to their total sales.
sure.
So across the board, on average, you're looking at just under 6%, which is very, very low.
Wow.
So 6% rent to sales ratio typically.
Yeah.
We see sites that have higher rent to sales ratios as well. But the reason that they trade for lower cap rates is there's a few reasons. Well, number one is that they're very recession resistant. When the country goes into a recession, in fact, more people eat fast food, right? The people that were eating at the Applebee's, or the Chipotle's maybe will downgrade a little bit and eat at the Wendy's or the McDonald's. They have typically, in many cases, very strong guarantees. So the guarantee, believe it or not, on most fast food restaurants that you see is not the actual company that you see on the building. It's typically a franchisee. So
Okay.
let's say, for example, Wendy's, there's a large franchisee called Meritage. They're a publicly traded company. They have, I believe, about 350 locations nationwide. That's a very strong guarantee, right? Very low likelihood that they're going to go out of business. And if the location that you own, right, if the operator says, you know what, I just can't continue here, and you've got a 20-year lease that's backed by this company that has 350 locations, they're going to keep paying you rent. So the stability, the recession resistant component, the strong guarantees typically, and the long-term leases. Most quick service restaurant leases are 15 or 20 years minimum. They often, in most cases, have annual or every 5-year escalations in the rental rate to hedge against inflation. So that makes those types of assets very attractive. I think that quick service restaurant, even during this last 14 months, where cap rates in many places in net lease have gone up significantly, in quick service restaurant they've risen, probably about half as much as some of the other sectors within net lease. They're also, in many cases, they're well located. They're off of freeway exits, or they're in major, highly trafficked areas. So for those reasons, I think they're very attractive assets. They're very stable assets. On the other end of the spectrum, multi-tenant, as you alluded to with shopping centers, I sell a lot of shopping centers. Those offer a whole different, slew of advantages. As the name implies, they've got more than one tenant. a shopping center that's 15 or 20,000 square feet could have anywhere from, 5 to 20 different tenants. In those cases, you typically have diversified lease rollovers.
Yeah.
So whereas in the single tenant property, you have one tenant and their lease expires at a certain date, they can either stay or leave. In a shopping center with, let's say, 10 tenants, you might have one tenant whose lease expires in 2025, one tenant whose lease expires in 2027, one in 2029, one 2031, one 2033, et cetera, et cetera. So there's diversified lease rollover. So at any given time, when a tenant may vacate, you still have significant occupancy in the center, which allows you to have stable cash flow and allows you to be cash flow positive, even as you're, taking care of, those lease ups as tenants leave the facility. So that's definitely something that provides additional value there. Makes those types of assets more attractive.
Let me jump in with the question here, Dan. This kind of touches back to something you were talking about earlier, and it's a little bit of a side, but it's pivoting back to earlier. What do you feel like, I guess, like in these, the verticals that I mentioned, like the quick storage restaurants, auto parts stores, malls, things like that, or shopping centers, do you feel like there's just so much to know in those spaces, and that's why you've kind of focused as a broker? Now we're talking about like broker specialization and expertise. You feel like that is essentially, there's so much to know in that that has basically compelled you to just focus in that kind of specific area?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you have a shopping center, right, and you want to sell the shopping center, do you want to go with the guy that's also selling multifamily, that's also selling industrial, that's also selling single family? And yeah, he dabbles a little bit in shopping centers. You want to go with him, or do you want to go with a guy that is like, this is one of his core specialties?
Yeah. I was asking that because, like, you were mentioning like very detailed, detail about, your knowledge about these, like, the quick service restaurants and the shopping centers, like your detail of knowledge there. It's like, wow, this is a lot of like information, of course. But then, like, to your point, like, hey, maybe somebody's like main focus is, like you said, multifamily. Like, are they going to know all these things that Dan knows, and the kind of knowledge and kind of insight and real world, tricks of the trade that you can bring, and the kind of knowledge and the conversations that you have?
Exactly. I mean, each one of these asset classes is a world into itself, right? I mean, if you have a multifamily deal, I'll refer you to someone who's an expert, but I am by no means an expert. I'm an expert in net lease and in multi-tenant retail. That's what I focus on. Because, like I said, each one of those, like, quick service restaurant is a whole science, and multi-tenant, shopping centers is a whole world into itself. And auto parts stores, every one of those has its nuances and its little, things that really only experts and expert investors and brokers are familiar with, and only those who specialize.
Do you look for brokers or people to bring on your team, Dan, that have like those very specific verticals?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that when someone, is able to specialize in one narrow focus, they're going to become, better at it. I will tell you, though, that it's more important from my perspective that someone is a hard worker, has integrity, and is going to pick up the phone and make those calls.
Yeah.
Because everything else is trainable. Everything else can come from experience, right? But you cannot teach motivation, and you cannot teach hustle.
Absolutely, man. So in the final section of the show here, Dan, as we wrap it up here, let's pivot it back to some of the things, I guess, that you have kept yourself growing as a professional and as a leader in your business, your company. What are maybe 3 things that you do on a continual basis that have led you to the success you've seen?
Yeah, so I read as much as possible. I read almost every night, some type of book that's on either psychology or business sales or real estate, right? I've always got 2 or 3 books at least on my nightstand that I'm
if I could be that bold, could I ask what they are, right? The ones you're reading right now?
Oh, you want to know what I'm reading right now, or you want to know the best ones?
No, the best. Either way, maybe the one you're reading out is the best you read, because sometimes the most recent stuff, like, this is such a good book. But anyway, best or the most recent.
To be straight with you, the stuff I'm reading is not that, like, mind-boggling. I would say that one of the best books I've ever read, and I just saw on LinkedIn that the author is going to be at one of the real estate conferences coming up, but it's a book called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. That's
I've seen that one out there. I've seen that one.
That's a great book. Now, I'm not an expert in multifamily, But if you want to learn about multifamily, there is a really good book called Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl, I believe. That's a really
Yes.
solid book.
Yeah. That's an awesome one too here. So
And
like you said, so pivoting back to your question, so reading, something you do
yeah,
as a practice, and then what, two other things there, if you would share.
so reading is not just the books, but it's also, every day I make sure to spend a little bit of time reading as many articles as I can from CoStar and from some of the other major publications to just know what's going on in the real estate market.
Yeah.
So reading in general has definitely been a key for me. Number two is I try to make myself as humble as possible when it comes to learning.
Yeah.
And even for my clients, like, I've been blessed to have, billionaire clients.
Yeah.
And the time that I'm able to spend with them on the phone, just getting to know them and asking questions, I think has been invaluable, because these are people that are successful in the exact space that I'm in. So that's definitely a big thing. And I think that, when I was younger, I tried to prove to the world that I knew everything. But as I got older,
Same here.
yeah, as I got older, what I really realized was that there's nothing to be gained by that mentality. What's if I have the mentality of, hey, let me learn as much as I can, right? Then I can gain and I can give back more. So I think that would be number two. And then number three is just like surround yourself by great people. I mean, I am so fortunate. Brandon Hanna, Bislaritis, Ryan Vinko, the principals of our firm, are incredible people that have taught me so much. They're good people. They're people that I spend time with outside of the office, people I would have in my home, and people that I care about, and I know the feeling is mutual. So that, to be a part of that, I mean, I feel like that's something like that's a once in a lifetime thing. If somebody finds an opportunity to be part of a family like I have here at Encore, that's just, I'm very thankful for that, and that's been crucial to my success.
That's amazing, man. So that's a perfect place to wrap up the show. And thank you for sharing all that knowledge, Dan, and your journey, your experience, your insights. Sure. And then also just like, I think I loved your path about how you went from like the beginning of the show, from single family to being a brokerage, and of course, laying it all out. And of course, the level of expertise that's needed and that you require of yourself. And then finally, as you wrapped it up, the things that you do to ensure success. So all those things are amazing. So I thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, folks. Anyway, so thank you for listening to another episode of the Investing Stuff You Should Know podcast. We appreciate your listening ship, if that's a word. We always appreciate a like, a comment, spread the word to friends. Until next time, signing off. Later.